Welcome. Before we begin, take a slow breath and let it out gently. Let your shoulders soften. Let the day fall away. You don't need to follow every word. Just let my voice drift along beside you, like rain against a window. We're going to travel back almost 100 years tonight to a quiet story of patience, of small clues, and of how one of the most famous cases in American history was slowly, carefully solved. There is no need to be afraid. Just rest and listen. It is the 1st of March, 1932. The place is a large country house near Hopewell in rural New Jersey. The house sits among gentle hills and bare winter trees, far from the lights of any town. It belongs to Charles Lindbergh, the aviator. 5 years earlier, he had become the most celebrated man in the world, the first to fly alone, non-stop, across the Atlantic Ocean. He and his wife, had a young son, not yet 2 years old. On that cold evening, the household followed its quiet routine. The child was settled into his nursery on the second floor. The windows were shut against the chill. The family went about their evening below. And sometime in those dark hours, the boy was taken from his room. By morning, he was gone. Outside, beneath the nursery window, investigators found a note had been left behind, asking for money. And a short distance from the house, lying discarded on the soft ground, they found a homemade wooden ladder. It was crudely built, in 3 sections that fit together. One of its rails had split. These two things, a note and a ladder, would matter more than anyone could have guessed. The story that followed gripped the entire nation. Newspapers called it the crime of the century. Charles Lindbergh was so beloved that people everywhere felt the loss as if it were their own. And because he was who he was, the case drew in everyone. Local police, state police, federal agents, and a great crowd of well-meaning citizens, all hoping to help. For a while, the sheer noise of it all made the work harder, not easier. Let yourself sink a little deeper now. There is no urgency here. The people in this story worked slowly, over many months, and we can take our time too. In the days after the child vanished, more notes arrived. The kidnapper, or kidnappers, asked for $50,000. The family wanted nothing more than to bring their son safely home, and so they agreed to pay. They turned to an unlikely go-between, an older gentleman named Dr. John Condon, a retired schoolteacher from the Bronx who had offered his help in a newspaper. Through coded messages in the papers, contact was made. And here, in the quiet planning of how the money would be handed over, lies the first thread that would one day unravel everything. The authorities made a careful decision about the ransom money. They did not simply gather ordinary cash. A good portion of it was paid in gold certificates. Now, a gold certificate was a kind of paper money used in those days, backed by gold held by the government. They looked a little different from regular bills, marked with a golden yellow seal. And the people preparing the ransom did something clever. They wrote down the serial number of every single bill, page after page of numbers, carefully recorded. They reasoned that these particular notes, the gold certificates, were unusual enough that someone spending a great many of them might eventually be noticed. The money was handed over one evening in a cemetery in the Bronx, passed to a shadowy figure in the dark. Sadly, the exchange did not bring the child home. The case, for a time, went cold. The country grieved, and the long, patient waiting began. But here is the thing about those carefully recorded serial numbers. They did not expire. They did not fade. Lists of them were printed and quietly handed out to banks all across New York and the surrounding areas. Tellers were asked to watch for them, to set aside any gold certificate that matched, and then simply to wait. And then something changed in the world of money itself. The next year, the United States began to move away from gold. People were asked to turn in their gold certificates and exchange them for ordinary currency. Suddenly, those golden sealed bills became rare. A bill that had once blended into a pocketful of cash now stood out. Anyone still spending them, especially in large numbers, drew the eye. The trap that had been set so quietly was slowly closing, all on its own. For 2 long years, bills from the ransom surfaced here and there, mostly around New York City. Each one was a tiny breadcrumb. A clerk would notice the golden seal, check it against the list, and report it. Investigators would map where it had been spent. Slowly, a pattern formed, like a shape emerging from fog. Someone was living in the city. Someone was spending this money a little at a time, trying not to be noticed. But the bills kept turning up, and the map kept filling in. Rest here a moment. Picture those quiet bank counters, the soft scratch of a pencil, a teller pausing over a single bill. This was not dramatic work. It was patient work, the kind of patience that wins in the end. The breakthrough came in the autumn of 1934. A man drove into a filling station in Upper Manhattan and paid for gasoline with a $10 gold certificate. The attendant, by then, knew that such bills were unusual and a little troublesome to deal with. Wanting to be careful, he jotted down the license plate number of the car on the bill itself, just in case. A small, ordinary act of caution. That bill, like the others, made its way to a bank, where a teller recognized it as part of the Lindbergh ransom. And this time, written right on the note, was a license plate number. The car was traced to a home in the Bronx. It belonged to a carpenter named Bruno Richard Hauptmann. When investigators came to speak with him, the clues began to gather quickly. A gold certificate from the ransom was found in his possession. And when they searched his garage, they found more, a great deal more, hidden carefully away. Thousands of dollars in the marked bills, the very money that had been recorded number by number 2 years before. The patient list had done its work. But the money alone was not the whole story. Remember the ladder. That crude, homemade ladder, left behind on the very first night. For 2 years it had been kept, studied, and examined by a quiet expert whose work would become famous in its own right. His name was Arthur Kohler, and he was a specialist in wood. He worked at a government forest products laboratory, and he understood timber the way a doctor understands the body. He had spent countless hours with that ladder. He studied the kinds of wood it was built from. He examined the tiny ridges left by the planes and saws that had shaped it, marks as distinct, in their way, as handwriting. He traced one of the boards back through lumber mills, following the grain and the tool marks, narrowing down where that particular wood might have been sold. And then came the detail that has fascinated people ever since. One rail of the ladder, Kohler believed, had not started life as ladder wood at all. It appeared to have once been a plank of flooring, later cut down and reused. When investigators examined the attic of the home in the Bronx, they found a section of floorboard had been sawn away. Kohler studied the cut. He matched the grain of the wood. He matched the spacing of the old nail holes to the nail holes in the attic joists. Piece by piece, he built the case that the wood in the ladder and the wood from that attic had once been a single board. Think of that for a moment, gently. A man who could read a piece of timber the way you might read a page. The rings of growth, the marks of a blade, the holes left by old nails. Nothing about it was loud or sudden. It was the quiet attention of someone who simply would not give up on a small wooden thing that everyone else had set aside. And so the case came together from 2 directions, like 2 streams meeting. From one side, the money, thousands of gold certificates, every serial number recorded, traced patiently across a great city until they led to a single garage. From the other side, the wood, a homemade ladder, studied board by board, until its grain pointed back to a single attic. 2 trails, both built on patience, both pointing to the same quiet house in the Bronx. The trial that followed, in the winter of 1935, was one of the most watched in American history. The recorded serial numbers were presented. The hidden money was presented. And Arthur Kohler took the stand to explain his study of the ladder, becoming, as some have said, the first expert ever to testify in an American court about the forensic reading of wood. Hauptmann maintained his innocence to the end. The jury, after weighing all they had heard, found him guilty. The case has never quite stopped being discussed. Even now, people debate the details, turn the evidence over, and wonder. That is often the way with very old stories. They keep a little mystery, no matter how many times they are told. But the heart of how they were caught is simpler and quieter than all the noise around it. It was not a single dramatic moment. It was patience. Someone wrote down a long list of numbers and waited 2 years for them to surface. Someone studied a wooden ladder, grain by grain, until it spoke. A gas station attendant paused over an unusual bill and jotted down a license plate. Small, careful acts, gathered slowly over time, until they formed something no one could deny. So let that be the thought you drift away on tonight. Not the fear, not the loss, but the patience. The quiet certainty that small, careful things, gathered gently over time, can reveal what was hidden. There is something almost peaceful in it. The slow turning of attention, the marked bills set aside, the ring of wood read like a sentence. Let your breathing slow now. Let the hills go dark and the rain fall soft against the glass. The list is closed. The ladder is studied. The long waiting is over, and there is nothing left for you to do but rest. Thank you for spending this quiet time with me. Let the story fade now, like fog lifting from the hills at dawn. Sleep well.